cover is Sequelize. Sequelize is a object relational mapper that can connect with a lot of different SQL based databases like Postgres, MySql, Sqlite, and MySql server. So we can basically save data in form of JavaScript objects, and it will automatically create SQL queries, which will automatically save data in to databases. Okay, the tables are called definitions or schema in object relational mapping systems, and each object translates to a particular row. Okay, so if you want to save an array of objects, a lot of rows are saved. If you want to fetch, you get an array of rows in a form of array of objects. Okay, so let's just start with Sequelize. The first thing that I'm going to do is make sure that MySql is running on my computer. Okay, so just on MySql and so MySql is running. How to get MySql to run would be different on different operating systems. On Windows, it would be a service that you need to start, and on Mac, this is a setting like this. And Linux, you have to do type something like sudo service MySql start. Okay, you get it on the internet how to start MySql for your operating system. MySql is running. We can check that. You can go open your terminal and type use this size a bit. If you write MySql u root, and that means you log into MySql show databases. You can see all the databases in MySql and like that. Make sure that you're able to log into MySql like that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create a database, and we're going to grant the user permission to use that database. I'm just going to note down those steps. So I have this project, just create a README file here, which would show what other steps I'm doing. Okay, so here goes. To start database, what you have to do is inside your shell or command line. Okay, open MySql shell using this command MySql u root. Okay, and then inside MySql shell, create database user and grant rights. Okay, so how do we do that? You're gonna take a look at that. Something like this. Create database sample db1. That's gonna create a database called sample db1, right? Then create user sample user1 identified by sample pass1. Okay, this creates the username with who has password. Okay, and then grant all privileges on sample db1 dot star, which means all tables of sample db to sample user1. Okay, I'll just write down these 3 lines for you so that what I'll do is create database sample db1. Okay, and then we're going to write create user sample user1 identified by password. Yes. And finally, we have to grant all privileges. Grant all privileges on the database name sample db1 to sample user1. Okay, that's it. Now we'll just check whether that works or not. We'll just exit out of this database, and then I'm going to try to log into MySql with the user sample user one. So first I try to log in. I would not be able to because it needs a password. Okay. So I write -p here. So when I write -p, that means that I want to enter a password. It asks for the password. I write sample pass1. Okay. And there we go. Database works. If I write show databases here, should be able to see sample db1 as one of the databases, right? That means that this user has got access for this particular database, and that's how you give access to this database. Okay. Next, we are going to install Sequelize, and so how to set up Sequelize here is, as you can see, getting started page. There's a getting started page on Sequelize docs. How to get started? We are going to npm install Sequelize and then npm install one of these depending on what database we're using. If you're using MySql, so we need to write this line npm install say MySql. Okay, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to initialize an npm package here in this folder first of all. So that's my package name and rest of the stuff. Okay, so then npm install Sequelize and MySql 2. Okay, so these are the two packages I would be installing. So when you install Sequelize, it cannot on its own connect to any database. It needs one of these four out of these four, either PG or MySql or SQLite 3 or TDS, to connect to any one of these databases. So you have to run at least one of these lines to be able to connect to the database. Okay, and there we go. So we have installed that part. Now let's connect to the database and check if it works or not. We're going to do create a new JavaScript file and call that connect.js. Okay. How to connect to MySql database is setting up a connection. We write like this. We require Sequelize. Then we construct a new Sequelize object. Sequelize is like a class. Okay, so you write new Sequelize. Then in the constructor you pass the database name, the username, and the password. Then you write what host, what dialect you're using. Okay, so here we go. Const Sequelize equal to require Sequelize. And then let's say our database equal to new Sequelize, and in the constructor we have to pass database name would be sample db1, then username sample user1, and then the password sample password. Okay. So ideally we should keep the password somewhere separately and require that variable here or something like that, but for now we're just testing, so I'm just writing it like this. And there's the options object, and here we have to write what host is going to be. It's going to be localhost, and this dialect is very important because giving this dialect option is what tells Sequelize what type of database it is, because although all SQL databases follow the same SQL syntax, similar SQL syntax, but there are tiny differences here and there. For example, auto increment in MySql is serial in Postgres, so those differences are there. We need to tell Sequelize what type of database we are using, so it will create the SQL queries in the appropriate way. Okay, there we go. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to check whether this database is working or not. So there is a .authenticate function which checks whether it worked or not, and it returns a promise, so we can write then and catch on that. Okay, so we will do db.authenticate, and inside db.authenticate we're going to do .then. So if we have been able to authenticate, write console.log connection worked, and otherwise just print the error that comes from authenticate function. Okay, let's just try this out and see how that works in our case. I'm just gonna run this file. Oh, sorry, localhost, spelling mistake, localhost. There we go. So connection worked. So what this line does is that it runs this command select 1+1, and when we write select 1+1, it means that no tables are created. but it does check whether the user and the password in the database are correctly working or not. Okay, so if you have been able to come up to here, it means that Sequelize basics are working. You're able to connect to your database. Next few videos, we're going to see how to create models and how to create relationships between them. Okay,